Heroes to me are like lighthouses. And, you know, we all have storms, but we need to have something that's up there so at least we can go towards. To me, George Washington was a hero, is a hero, even a role model, because, you know, he was able to weather the proverbial storms. I came to the United States because of George Washington and freedom.
George Washington was a hero.
Washington's definitely a family man.
He was a lifelong learner.
He's a superb athlete.
Washington was a very ambitious man.
He's more an action-driven person than a philosophical person.
He also remains at heart an opportunist and a gambler.
He really lays the groundwork for American history to come, for the democracy and freedom that we appreciate today.
There's a wonderful painting of Washington when he was about 40, 45 years old, just right at the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And there's something in that image that speaks to me because it shows at the same time his humanity, that he shared many of the vulnerabilities, if you will, as the rest of us. And yet at the same time, there's a commanding presence there. There's a stature. There's a sense of dedication and inspiration in him. You can almost see it in his eyes.
Today, we kind of lump these 6 or 7 great, brilliant, terrific men into a group and call them the Founding Fathers. But in their eyes, there was only one go-to guy, and that was George Washington. He's the one that carried it through and against all odds established the strongest, greatest nation that's ever been on the face of the earth.
Here's a man who was willing to risk everything that he held most dear for a cause that he believed in. And yet he felt that he had been placed in this situation by Providence, that he had a duty that was laid out for him and a goal that he must try to the best of his ability to fulfill, no matter what the consequences may be. And that example of dedication, I think should be an inspiration for us all.
He, looked to create, to improve. He was doing all sorts of things, not for his own personal gain, although that was always part of it, but because he had this larger vision and he wanted to develop these models for the country to follow.
Well, I think Robert Frost once said that Washington was one of the few leaders that was never carried away by power. And I think that's putting your finger right on what made Washington special. I think his greatest gift to America was really the ability to turn over power just when it's reached its highest degree.
I don't know of anyone else during his time who could have done that quite as George Washington did.
He was setting himself apart as somebody who was breaking with the past, who was doing something that was entirely new and entirely unprecedented.
Because really the glory of America and tangentially the glory of Washington in history rest on whether this experiment in freedom can work or not. Washington gave us a priceless opportunity. What we do with it is up to us.
The building is a perfect symbol that every Masonic temple represents.
This is a true landmark.
It's reflective of George Washington, who was our foremost Freemason.
When you enter the memorial, you're overwhelmed with Washington.
You can't see that statue of George Washington and not be impressed. It's just a commanding presence in Memorial Hall, as George Washington was a commanding presence in life.
When a person comes up the steps and enters through these bronze doors with a colossal statue, there should be a reaction there that challenges the visitor to come to grips with who this man in standing before them is.
It has to inspire some degree of awe. I've been to this building several times before, but even today, I'm walking up the steps. There's a little thrill that comes from that. Much of it also, of course, relates to the character of George Washington. And there's a sense that this is a connection to the founding principles of this country.
Freemasons are builders, and what better example of building than a new building, which shows the strength and the endurance of the country.
And it all begins again with a cornerstone in 1923. Masons around the country, throughout the world, the temple, the memorial, becomes a real centerpiece of what they value in their beliefs and their feelings about Washington.
These men were born in the time of horse and buggy, and they experienced perhaps the greatest innovations and changes and inventions of any lifetime. And Washington could be the guiding light of what America was, to guide them through these changes as they moved through the 20th century.
The construction of the memorial spans not only the 1920s, which of course is a wealthy, prosperous, happening time for Alexandria and the rest of the country, but then the Depression comes along and the thing's not done yet. But the Masons keep chugging along and they raise the money and they keep the project moving forward. Charles Callahan, who was the leader of this enterprise the whole time, was adamant that it not be public money, that this was money that was raised from amongst Masons and contributions from the Masonic community. And they kept it going despite the Depression until it was dedicated in 1932 in really the depths of the Depression.
The memorial obviously is built by Freemasons, but the memorial was not built for Freemasons exclusively. It was built for all people. It's open to the public 7 days a week. And it's designed to encourage visitors to learn more about George Washington first and understand his relationship with Freemasonry.
Its purpose is to demonstrate Washington not only as the archetypal Freemason, but also as the greatest symbol of America and our national identity. I believe this is most beautifully reflected in the fourth floor exhibit that beautifully narrates Washington's life from his humble beginnings as a poor farm boy in Tidewater, Virginia, to the exalted position that we see him in today as our symbol of American identity.
Like the Lincoln Memorial across the river, the Memorial Hall here in the Masonic Memorial is a contemplative space. It's a place that encourages the visitor to come face to face with Washington. This is a true landmark, like most of the major Masonic buildings around the country. Fortunately, they tend to be appreciated as such. They tend to be very well maintained. They are regarded as great landmarks in their communities, and so I think we're probably not going to be in much danger of this building coming to a state of decrepitude. But you never know. Things like that do happen.
Well, certainly the work is to keep that memorial the gem of Freemasonry in the United States. It is the only institution, certainly of its kind, that all jurisdictions, all Masons in the United States are a piece of. That happened back in 1910, that all of us became a co-owner of that building. You need to be part of this. The Masons of certainly Michigan, but all across the United States and around the world, support this memorial for a lot of different reasons. It's important for us to have this central source, this central point that connects us. How you can support it is really twofold. I think, number one, you can support it by visiting it, becoming part of it, understand what it's trying to teach the world. And the second is, of course, financial. The memorial is not, doesn't operate for free. It's a very big building, it's an old building, it needs to be continually updated, and we want that building to be the finest gem that you can have in the United States to memorialize somebody who we hold in such high esteem and regard.